Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And today's guest is Sean Morrison, who is president of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Came in as president this year in 2020. And it's been an interesting year so far, I would say, for you, Sean. Nobody for probably the past 100 years has had to deal with a pandemic in their first year as president of OREA. How are things going behind the scenes at OREA? How are you guys adapting to all of this?
Well, I'm happy to say that, yeah, although it's been a very interesting year to be president so far, that the team that we have at OREA has absolutely stepped up. I mean, they're incredible in their support, whether that be in office or as we are now remotely from home. It's been a very seamless transition, and we've done a lot of good for the 80,000 members across the province.
Right. So, John, I just wanted to jump in and say, I mean, as a provincial association, you represent the Ontario Realtors. Obviously, there are different jurisdictions. There's Toronto Real Estate Board, Barrie has a board, but you also have federal counterparts, being the Canadian Real Estate Association. I just wanted to make sure our audience knows sort of the role you play and who you play with.
Yeah, absolutely. We represent the 80,000 realtors in the province of Ontario and the 37 real estate boards in Ontario. So we're the provincial representatives for that, and you're correct. Our federal counterparts are CREA, the Canadian Real Estate Association, and they cover coast to coast in Canada.
Right, and you're the guy to ask with regards to this now COVID-19. At the beginning of it, when we first started hearing of it, the market was moving along well. January, February, there was a lot of fear that this might totally crash the market. Time has proven that the demand is still there. There was a bit of a dip. Maybe you can give us some insights, because you're paying attention to all the markets. I'm mostly focused on my own market here in the Barrie area. How overall throughout Ontario has COVID-19 impacted on the real estate market and on consumers?
Well, I think early on, as COVID came in, nobody really knew what to expect. So when you saw, tail end of February through to roughly end of May, the market kind of paused for a while. There were some essential transactions that needed to take place, people that maybe were already in transit or had sold a home and absolutely had to buy a home. But for the most part, people stayed home. As far as our membership goes, very, very happy to see the response from the realtors across the province. We put out some guidance. They heeded that guidance very well. And I think that has led to the confidence in the consumer in returning to the real estate market, because they know that Ontario realtors are looking out for their clients and their communities first throughout COVID-19. So we're seeing quite a strong recovery on the buyer side. The seller side may be lagging a little bit more, which is causing a supply and demand issue across the province.
Okay, and one barometer there with membership, if the market is soft, you tend to see membership, new member numbers go down, or at least go a little quieter. We haven't seen that through this, have we?
No, and by lobbying to maintain our status as an essential service, the government did name us an essential service, which allowed us to continue on those essential transactions. But we also lobbied heavily alongside the Canadian Real Estate Association to ensure that realtors had access to any government programs that were available as well for stimulus, which allowed us to have our membership maintained through COVID-19. And then as we came out into June and the market started to return, we're seeing that the reports from boards are that numbers are pretty steady as far as membership, or possibly even a little bit up from the people that were filtering out of the programs and took this time to get their system set up as part of their business.
So Sean, I want to jump in and say, I mean, clearly COVID has had a massive impact globally. We all know that. However, if there's one thing that we also know is that while economies may have been forced, or practices may have been forced to go into some form of check and figure out how we can move forward yesterday to tomorrow, certainly life itself didn't pause. There are natural cycles. There's birth, there's moving, coming of age and moving out of your parents' home into your own life. There's marriage, there's divorce, there's people who move on in life and die, and there's an estate sale. So those certain elements couldn't go on pause. It's just not reasonable to expect that. And your colleagues or your membership as a profession has done a remarkable job in terms of pivoting. Yes, some people, you saw the ingenuity come out and go into virtual tours, et cetera. Obviously, your industry has been at the forefront in terms of electronic signature and being able to move that way. So that wasn't a massive shift. But obviously, your profession has had to learn how to be dynamic, and I think you've done so very well. I want to push a button with you, though, and get your lobby hat on, if you will. We recently had the Attorney General for Ontario on. He's obviously responsible for court processes and legal transactions in banking. And the provincial government in Ontario has come out to say we're joining the 21st century and making transactions possible, empowering law firms and people to be able to carry on transactions. Where I've got an issue is where the rest of the world hasn't jumped in. I would say federally with banking institutions. How many of your clients or your membership's clients have been faced with a scenario where they suddenly found themselves stifled because they had to reveal or admit that they accepted a CERB payment, or maybe they accepted, unbeknownst to them, a mortgage deferral offer from their institution, and it actually injured them or hurt them in the process of a transaction?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we've heard from members across Ontario that financing has become infinitely more difficult during COVID-19 for some of the reasons that you had alluded to at the beginning. Banks weren't using electronic signatures. It was wet signature up until COVID-19. So they're learning those programs and those systems now as part of this pandemic. We are seeing that government assistance, or if you were in the hospitality industry, for instance, that is infinitely more difficult to get financing now than it was pre-COVID-19 because of the uncertainty in the market. So that's certainly something that's happening across Ontario. I don't think I could put it into a percentage for you, but there's a good percentage of the transactions, depending on the client and their background, that are being affected by the banking industry at the moment and the mortgage industry, and the ability to get funds.
So what I want to do is just real quick before we go to break, and we're going to have to go to break in about 30 seconds. I just wanted to find out, what opportunity do you have? How open is the door for your industry to be speaking with your provincial and federal members of parliament to ensure that, okay, we did okay, but we got to do better? And how receptive are they to criticism?
I'll be honest, we've worked with the provincial government throughout COVID-19, and the relationship has been fantastic. They really want to seek industry professional knowledge to make good decisions in the industry, and have basically worked alongside us to develop some of the policies that have come out around, say, banning of open houses and allowing us to maintain an essential service. So from the provincial standpoint, it's been really good. We've been working with OREA alongside the federal partners as well, and the MPs, and are making some headway there as well as far as the programs go. Certainly, we would always be open to the conversation and always open to working with government, because I think if we work hand in hand, we can definitely get to a better place.
When we come back from a break, Mike, I know you've got some ideas about commercial real estate. I also want to talk about real estate as an investment and what it's like to be a landlord. But we got to go to break real quick. Stay with us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Barrie, you are enjoying the benefit of having the president of the Ontario Real Estate Association with us today, Sean Morrison. Thanks for your expertise, and thanks for agreeing to join us via Zoom.
Oh, happy to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So before the break, we were talking about sort of the health of the market as we see it today, certainly in sort of reality 2.0 post-COVID. And you mentioned that the market's still relatively strong, but there's a bit of a hesitance maybe on some of the seller market. And I wanted to sort of poke that bear a little bit more. Certainly in our area here in Simcoe County, we've recognized some healthy strength in the market, but also the new inventory coming on, and who's gobbling up that new inventory. When you read in the news that commercial or corporate employers are having some success with their employees working from home, And then you can't help but notice that there's a bit of an exodus of people leaving the GTA for fairer pastures, fairer land to live in, getting more house for their dollar, better quality of life, perhaps outside the GTA. Are they the ones who are buying up all of the inventory? And what does that mean for people who might list their house for sale, who are native of Barrie, and will they be able to afford a new house in Barrie?
I mean, it's certainly an interesting question. Throughout COVID, we've conscripted some research from Nanos Research. And one of the points that came up in our June research was that roughly about 62, 63% of people that identified as being buyers in the market were open to, or somewhat open to, moving outside of the urban environment and moving into rural or suburb type areas like you're talking about. So there's certainly that thought, and I think that was amplified by COVID. It's always been there. There's been a bit of an exodus to get more value or more space outside of the city for your dollar. We always say drive till you qualify in my area, so you just keep driving out until you qualify for the home you want. But as far as a mass exodus, I don't see that being a root cause. It was certainly amplified by COVID-19 in the way that we've been living in our houses, working in our houses. There are schools, there are refuge, there are vacations right now, all throughout COVID-19. So I think people have been taking a good, long, hard look at what's important in a home for them, thinking maybe this could happen again in the future, or something of that nature, maybe a second wave. So I think what is happening is roughly, I think from our research, I think it was 25% of those surveyed had changed what they wanted in a house based on COVID-19. So I think as to answer your question, people moving out of urban areas might be looking for more space or bigger home for the value. So that might be a catalyst there.
And certainly value. And one statistic or note that I heard recently is in the downtown Toronto area, if you're renting a 2-bedroom home, you're paying as much or more than you would be paying within an hour of Toronto, using Barrie as an example, for a mortgage on a 3-bedroom home. So I think once people start to see that and make that comparable, that's encouraging people to move away from the GTA and into areas like where you are in Burlington, Hamilton area, Barrie, heading east to Oshawa, Pickering, Whitby, out that way and beyond. We're seeing that, and we're also seeing the city of Toronto growing at the same time. So there's not a net decrease in population in Toronto. It's an expanding city is what's happening.
I guess, though, Mike, I would ask you the question, though, if I was renting in Toronto, if I'm working in Toronto and I'm renting in Toronto because I have to be close to my office downtown Toronto, but I can now work from home, am I suddenly finding myself able to qualify and telecommute? Drive till you qualify, but
you have windows opened up to you now. Suddenly you can look beyond the physical GTA and live wherever. If your work travels with you, then go where you want to be. Go where you can best afford. Why not?
So Sean, as the president of OREA, though, what are you seeing in terms of rental supply and inventory? And is there a shift from renter to buyer, just not in the same actual marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something that we studied through the Nanos research, and we found that roughly a quarter of those that are renting, identified as renters, said that they are much more likely to buy a house this year than they would have been in years past.
That's this year.
That's just this year. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, affordability wise, when you look at exactly your point, Arif, that if you can telecommute from Burlington or Barrie, then you don't have to rent the place right downtown unless you want it for convenience. If you work at home, then you, as Mike said, you can work from wherever you are, and right. you have a lot of choices to you. But we did also see a very strong, roughly about 35% of those surveyed that wanted to stay in the urban cores, and they felt that that was where they wanted to be. So there is still a very strong appetite for the amenity that comes along with living in an urban environment, having that walkable neighborhood and those amenities and transit close at your doorstep.
Yeah, I did want to touch on something. Whatever your market is in Ontario, in the last 5 to 10 years, the value of the homes in that market have at least doubled. In many cases, have gone up almost 3 times over the last 5 to 10 years. Meanwhile, the average wage has not doubled or tripled in that timeline. So there's a lot more pressure on first-time buyers buying into the market. And with that fragility there, it frustrates me. I've been hearing rumors. Now, again, I must stipulate the rumors. This is not a policy or a plan in place by the government, but there is talk about the idea of taxing equity on your home when you sell. So if you sell a home for $100,000 more than you paid for it, at the moment, that money is yours. You put your hard work into that house. As far as I'm concerned, you deserve that. Government sees this as low-hanging fruit, perhaps, and they want to tax that. Their claim in discussing this, from what I'm hearing, is that this will help to level or even out the market. Where they've used that claim before, things have not worked out so well in trying to manipulate and calm the market. My philosophy is leave it alone and let supply and demand work on its own. But what do you think with regards to this? If government was to suddenly start taxing the equity on homes, what do you think the implications of that might be on the market and on the economy, if you have any thoughts on
Ron,
that?
I'm giving you 45 seconds for that answer, and then we'll come back after the break, and I'm gonna be relentless on my answers. Go ahead.
All right, 45 seconds. Okay, here we go. No, I mean, we definitely wouldn't support any taxation on your principal home in that way. I think it erodes value. It erodes people's savings. I mean, currently your house is one of the best vehicles you have to help build funds for retirement. So, I mean, that would hurt seniors if you did that. That may be downsizing or going, to, facilities and that sort of thing. That's money that they need to live. And that's, some people's RRSPs, right, are in their house. So it's a definite investment for people for long-term health, but it also would erode the ability for people to move up. So, that first-time buyer that scrimped and saved and got into their townhouse now wants to sell that townhouse to get a detached home for their growing family. They may not be able to do that because once you take out the fees, the lawyer's fees, land transfer tax, in Toronto, a double land transfer tax, and then you tax the capital gains on top of that, they might not have enough left to make the move. So I think what you're going to do is stagnate the market.
And I'll throw one more thing in there quickly before we go to break. And the other thing is a lot of parents are relying on that equity in their homes to help their children buy into the real estate market now too. Now, if you're going to start taxing that equity, you're going to stifle that. And that next generation of buyers is going to be hurt by that, as far as I can see.
We're going to break with that thought in mind. Stay with us on Rogers TV, Barrie, on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we'll be back with Sean Morrison, President of the Ontario Real Estate Association, right after this break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Sean Morrison, President of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Thank you for being here. I'm going to get right into it. That last topic and comment really lit a fire with me. I think there's nothing more disgraceful, more disgusting than basically a government trying to make up for its lack of ability to handle their own affairs than to tap into what has been really sacred for as long as I've known home ownership in Canada, and that is to tax the equity or the savings, certainly on a retiree, or the ability of people to help their children enter into the next phase of life by getting into home ownership themselves. I'm glad you've got an opinion on it. What are you doing about it?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, we're working alongside the government. What we're seeing here is, an ability to attempt to help the market in affordability is what they're claiming from what you guys were saying. The affordability issue was around long before COVID. It was around for the last few years in Ontario, where we have a supply and demand imbalance. So we have a set of policies and red tape and procedures that don't allow housing stock to get to market in time for the demand that's there. So we're always playing catch up on that demand. You see that across the province now during COVID, where a lot of the sellers haven't returned to market, but the buyers have. So we're having multiple offers across the province because there's way more demand than there is supply.
Driving price.
So
let me get into something though, Sean. I want to get more to the point here. We've known for decades that CPP is bankrupt. OAS isn't going to cut it. We know that the idea of going to work for 30 years and coming out with a lifelong pension doesn't exist for the vast majority of Canadians. RSP, employee match benefits programs don't exist for the majority of Canadians. So this was sort of that last safe haven, that last refuge was investing in the equity of my home or investing in my home. And now that's being vilified. Homeowners are being vilified and being considered.
Not yet. It's rumored to be. It's being discussed.
But it's been
on. To be clear,
it's been on the agenda for some time, and that's where this government wants to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, alongside that, Arif, you know, like I said, we wouldn't support a taxation on home ownership in that way because it does erode that value. Right. I think if we solve the supply and demand issue and we bring more housing to market and we have new and innovative ways of bringing housing to market, as of right zoning, for instance, is something we're lobbying for, where in and around transit hubs that you can build more dense populated buildings so that people do have that leg up into the market to start at a better place. What that does is that first time buyer can then displace that move up buyer, which can buy from the downsizer, right? So if you disrupt any of that chain along the way, you get what we have now, which is a supply and demand imbalance. Some of the other things that we're doing to address is lobbying to get some of the red tape around getting new homes to market. Currently, a builder can buy a piece of land and it might take 12 to 14 years for them to flush the first toilet on that site. And that's just unacceptable. You know, we're planning subdivisions based on data that's 8 to 10 years old. As far as statistics go. So I will say that so far, working alongside our GR team with the Ford government and working alongside the NDP in opposition as well, have been really good at looking, taking a good hard look at this and addressing this red tape issue. And I'm hopeful that down the road we'll see housing come to market quicker and some new and innovative housing solutions come to market to solve the supply and demand imbalance, which will bring with it affordability.
Right.
Excellent. So go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, and I don't know how close we are to the end, but to put on your, you know, Carmack, the magician's hat here, your soothsayer hat, and give your thoughts, your predictions on where you see the market going in the next few years, post-pandemic and beyond. Are you confident in Ontario's real estate economy that it will continue along at a healthy pace? Or
I'm going to kind of give you a 2-point answer on that one, and I would say the first point is it depends on what government does in the next few months. So right now we're riding that pent-up demand that's here, but we haven't seen the amount of sellers return to the market. So if the government brings some sort of a stimulus package forward, say a land transfer tax rebate or a home equity renovation credit, to get that moving, I see there being a stronger real estate market into the fall, and that'll help the economic recovery long term. As we know, housing is an economic engine that pulls along the rest of Ontario with it. So I think the housing sector can help lead us on this recovery, but it goes with the caveat that we need to see government do some sort of stimulus package for the sector to allow that to happen.
So short answer though, Sean, would you say that sellers are having a struggle coming to market because of the fear of not qualifying for their next iteration of home ownership? Because plain and simple, if I've been in my house for 20 years, all I have to do is sign a renewal, 1-page renewal document. There's very little vetting. If I have to requalify, even to downsize, I could be out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly qualification would come into it. Also, what we're seeing is in regards to COVID, people may not want to have people going through their home at the moment, and that has slowed it as well. So I think it's a variety of factors. I think certainly the stress test is brought into that. I think, you know, there's a variety of different things that are contributing to why sellers are a little slower to return to the market. Maybe it could be employment, right? Maybe they're unsure about their future employment because they might still be furloughed from COVID-19. So there's a variety of factors playing in, but we need to get that seller confidence back up to get the units to market for buyers to purchase, which will then drag the rest of the economy with it, because housing has many spin-offs in the economy.
Sean, we got to go. I just want to pay you a compliment. You are almost as good as your colleague, Tim Hudak, who's your executive director. He's been a great guest of ours. We want to thank you, though, for being here with us, a great resource, and we look forward to having you on the show in the near future for an update.
Happy to be back, guys. Thank you so much.
Take care.